Well, joining me now to unpack this are political analysts David Mohale, who's in Durban, and Rebone Tau, who joins me live in studio. Rebone, let me start with you. One of the closing remarks there by the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, was the ANC Youth League is back. He unpacked a lot. He spoke a lot about his expectations and what he would like to see the ANC Youth League leadership achieve and focus on. Let's just get your initial reaction to what we've heard from President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Good evening and good evening to the viewers at home. I think for me what was a bit disturbing about his speech when he speaks about how the Youth League deliberated at this Congress. I don't know where did they deliberate on any issue, because as things stand they've not been to any commissions. I've spoken to delegates, they only came here to vote, so it's not clear in terms of what is the mandate of this 26th NEC of the ANC Youth League. But yes, he raises critical points, especially when he speaks about the youth activism. But the problem I have when he talks about the youth activism that needs to be revived, he links it to an elections campaign, because that has to be beyond elections, the youth activism. You need a youth league that is driven in communities, dealing with challenges that people face in communities, because the Youth League, has got in each and every ward has got a table in an ANC meeting, and in most township and village wards, the ANC is still in control, of some of those communities. So you'll need a Youth League that indeed is active. But also he speaks about the HIV rate going high. What I think the president should emphasize is on the economic challenges, because some of these young women go and be with older men for economic, because they're facing economic challenges because of poverty and so forth, and he should emphasize that the Youth League should really, focus on programs that liberate young people economically, so that this HIV and AIDS can be fought in amongst young people.
Definitely. I think a big issue and a bone of contention is the fact that the President himself mentioned that some of the issues that were there at the inception of the ANC Youth League are still issues that us as South Africans are dealing with today. It's a big concern. Let's bring David Mohale into this conversation, who's also a political analyst. David, your reaction to hearing from President Cyril Ramaphosa at the ANC Youth League Congress?
Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers of ENCA. Well, at first I thought that the president was somewhat inadvertently passing the responsibilities of the ANC to the membership and leadership of the ANC Youth League. When you speak about the responsibilities relating to solving the challenges around load shedding, unemployment, in my view, I think those have to be dealt with by the African National Congress. In terms of the structure of the ANC as an organization, the leagues constitute only a minimal percentage. And by and large, even though the Youth League may have representation in terms of ANC leadership and government, it's only minimal. And if you want to resolve real issues facing the citizens of the Republic of South Africa, that's what must be dealt with by the African National Congress. So I don't think that that's a bit unfair on the newly elected leadership of the ANC. But moving beyond that, I don't think that the leadership of the newly elected leadership of the ANC, having been elected 8 years later since the organization has been, if you like, on autopilot on the basis of absence of legitimate elected leadership. I don't think that what ANC Youth League has not been able to do since the expulsion of Julius Malema as the president has been able to have a leader that is able to rise and identify their own identity that visibly and concretely contrasts from that of Julius. Julius would have emerged in particular context. And I do think that with Colin now as the leader of the Youth League, one thing that he needs to do right is to try not to be either Julius or the opposite of Julius. He must just be himself and try to understand where the country is and what are the current challenges that both the country and young people in particular are faced with. Just to close my my comment now. I think about a year or two ago, if I'm not mistaken, there was a report that was published by Statistics South Africa on the social profile of young people. And I'm raising this importantly because in my own offline engagements with young people that I happen to know, especially those who are in leadership structures within ANC Youth League and other political parties, I always say to them, guys, there's this report from Statistics South Africa that reflects where young people are in South Africa today. Where are you in terms of dealing with these issues? For instance, just to give one example, that report indicates that amongst other challenges, young people are beginning to either move in groups or go back to their families or homes on the basis of the rising cost of life.
Cost of living, yes.
Cost of living, yes, owing to inflation and other factors. Now, that is what you are dealing with at the on the face value at the community level, but it also affects other aspects of social development and growth. For instance, if I, as David Mohale, wanted to take Rebone, for instance, as my partner, as a wife, but I cannot afford that on the basis of the rising cost of living, and now I'm forced to move back home with my family. And now if I take Rebone is now forced to come back and live with my family. It contributes to our individual and collective growth as a young couple. And I do think that this is where, in terms, because politics is not just about what we see at conferences. Politics necessarily and fundamentally must contribute to the development of the nation. And if young people as a stratum are not able to rise up on the basis of what they are going through economically, this is where I do think that young people need to occupy that space. And therefore, Colin and the collective, the responsibility and the challenge that they are immediately seized with is over and above what the President Ramaphosa might have said. How do they relate to different categories of young people? For instance, I've got a daughter who is 17 years. How can Colin and his collective relate to her as a prospective first voter next year? Mm-hmm. Because amongst other things, this is what President Ramaphosa says they must deal with. But other than my daughter, you've got a graduate who has been unemployed for 5 years. How does this newly elected leadership relate to that person and go to them and say they must vote for the African National Congress? Because unless they're able to do that, freedom, in terms of how we understand it, remains elusive. Because freedom is not only the ability to vote for your preferred political party. Freedom, if we were to quote Nelson Mandela from his autobiography, is indivisible. It's not only about the suffrage, it's about social aspects, economic, and etc. Now, we can go tomorrow to vote for whichever political party we want to vote for, but that vote must translate into qualitative development of my own life. And this is what the preface of the Constitution of South Africa speaks to. And therefore, fundamentally, this is what Colin and his collective that has been elected must be able to appreciate and deal with. And move beyond slogans. We are at the age where development must be very tangible. If you come to me to say vote ANC, you must be able to tell me why I must vote for the ANC. Don't tell me about, like the President was referring to Mbede, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo. It's okay. I mean, we understand history, we can read that. But in 2023, it's about where we are. How can the Youth League contribute to issues that are relevant to the young people in the countries and the country as a whole?
Indeed, David, you bring up a very interesting topic, and Rebone, that is one of engaging the youth of South Africa, getting them interested in politics again, getting them to trust the ANC Youth League in taking them forward, in being the preferred leader, as the President had mentioned. How does the newly elected top 6 leadership of the ANC Youth League do just that? How do they gain the trust of young South Africans?
I think first and foremost, and this is what the President spoke about, that autonomy. Because that autonomy will help them to really move away from wanting to be controlled by certain leaders within the ANC. And because that has led to the Youth League for the longest time to be inward looking, because There was an NEC that was elected in 2015 and later dissolved in 2019 because they were so inward looking, because they could not, be their own people as young people and understand the mandate that branches, has given to them to lead not only members of the ANC, but young people in society at large. So they will have to really make sure that they are not involved in ANC factional battles, but they champion interests of young people as the twin task of the Youth League is to champion interests of the young people and rally them behind the banner of the ANC. And the president talks about the 1944 generation that comes up with the program of action. And indeed, if one would quote Frantz Fanon, that each generation must define its mission. Julius Malema's generation in 2011 defined their mission. This leadership of young people have got to do that, define their own mission and make sure that, but they are found in communities, and leave this thing of opulence, and not want to be deployed in government, all of them, because that is where they tend to lose themselves, because now they tend to want to then depend on the ANC, for deployment, and then they get to be, controlled by leadership.
Yeah, definitely. David, let's chat then and expand on the ANC Youth League, as Rebone has stated, defining their mission. We've heard of issues that young people in South Africa are facing, the issues of unemployment, poverty, access to education, access to healthcare, but these have been long ongoing conversations that have been there for years. How does the ANC Youth League now re-strategize in making sure that those issues are dealt with and that there's actual progress as soon as possible?
Okay. Let me borrow from my experience as an activist myself, but at the same time as a scholar. Mm-hmm. Until a point where the ANC Youth League has capacity to convince the leadership of the ANC that development in any country has never been about ideological neutrality. ANC and this country will never get anywhere. The fact that ANC ideologically assumes is a broad church, but in practice, actually, it is not. It is more pro-business, it is pro-capital, instead of addressing the development of what it defines and identifies as its own motive forces, which would be, according to the strategy and tactics, the rural people, the poor, the women, the Africans in general, Black in general, African in particular. The current economic policies that the African National Congress is pursuing are not in the interest and to the benefit of those that it thinks and identifies and defines as its own motive forces. ANC must just do what, for instance, China is doing. We always hear and learn that a number of African, ANC leaders go to China to visit for this and that and that. You must just be very brave in terms of what you need to do. And that, in the short term, may mean that all of us may have to make some sacrifices. It could be that all of us as citizens may have to let go of certain things that we're used to. But or perhaps to be fair to both the ANC and therefore its leagues in the context of the conversation, ANC Youth League, is that because in this country we have, every 2.5 years you contest elections, because next day is national elections, 2021 is local government elections. You are therefore not actually disabled to take bold and brave decisions that you need to be taking. And I do think that in the past 29 years, almost 30 years now since democratization, this is what maybe at objective level has been working against the African National Congress. But as a governing party, at some point you need that bravery to be unpopular. It could be that in the short term, you may have to lose elections. In any case, by the way, if I were to be part of the leadership of the ANC, I would say because of own goals that ANC has been committing, the support has already been dwindling. And we would rather lose support because we're taking brave decisions that are in the interest of the majority of the people than just basically saying, oh, well, you are free because we can vote. Freedom is not about voting. Freedom is about qualitative development of the people. It's about the indexes that you identify that uplift the quality of living of your people in terms of the preface of the Constitution. And by the way, the chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, by the way. And in all honesty, if we were to have honest conversation about where we are as a country, it could be that in the first 15 years or so, we were doing well. But we have since regressed. And I do think this is where young people within ANC need to be very bold and honest with the African National Congress to say to the older people that we started well, but we are no longer going in the direction that we should be heading to. And I do feel for Colin and those who have been elected that for them to identify with young people across the board and be relevant, they may have to own up to the sins that they never committed. And these sins have been committed by the old people. And part of the problem in Africa in general is the fact that you could have done well as a liberator of your own country, but you may not be a good player in terms of taking forward the liberation agenda, the development agenda. And this is the problem where I think South Africa is stuck with, that the people who have done well to bring us to 1994, they continue to consider themselves good dancers. And some of them, quite frankly, are no longer good dancers.
David, we have to leave it there. I have to interject. I do apologize. We have to take a quick break, but I want to thank you for your insights and chatting to us as we unpack the ANC Youth League's elective Congress and also what President Cyril Ramaphosa had to say during that closing address. David, thank you for your time. Rebona, thank you for your time as well, but we will be chatting to you a little bit later as we continue to unpack President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech as he closed off the ANC Youth League's elective conference.